I'm curious about how technology like AI changes the psychology of persuasion in advertising and marketing. My name is Quan Xie. Currently, I'm associate professor of digital advertising in Timberlake Advertising Institute at Southern Methodist University.
I am very interested in a recent publication that you had about scholarly work, and if you could share more about that.
That was actually two pieces of research published by Journal of Global Marketing. So the work was actually conducted by a group of scholars from the different countries of the world. Basically, like we are proposing a model to help like scholars or researchers building their personal brand. So in that model, we're proposing like a process for researchers, including like three stages. Stage one is like how they can help them to position their personal brand. And stage two is like in building up this like personal brand or IT, what are the characteristics like core identity or extended identity they should consider in building that brand core. And then stage three is like after establishing this personal brand, it's going to be iterative. So how to use the feedback to like refine that personal brand. And also after, building up this like personal brand, how to use digital channels to disseminate like the research like findings and outcomes and to like really make the personal IP or brand more solid for an online presence.
Many scholarly articles and publications are just staying within those scholarly publications, and maybe some of the readers are finding them, but they could be so much more helpful to more people. Is that correct?
Yeah, so in general, like for traditional academic research or findings, no matter in health or science or social science, there are several like issues about really making an impact. One problem is like most of those research, are published in academic journals. And then for the readers, they really have to pay a very, very expensive fee to get access to those journals, either to the database, right? Or to just purchase maybe a single piece of content. So there's a really high like paywall out there. And the second obstacle is like for most of the research, like there's a format that, right, we really have to follow in order to really write a very scientific and very rigorous like finding. But the problem is like that piece of writing usually will include excessive information and make it really difficult and full of jargons, make it really difficult for regular readers or the public to really understand that information. And also in general, research is mostly like distributed within the academia, the little circle in discipline, and then rather than just be shared with the public stakeholders who maybe find really, big value from those pieces.
What would you say is the difference between kind of the PR outreach versus some of the marketing outreach that you would be recommending? Like at SMU, I would say news-wise, we are more of a PR. We're not a marketing tool necessarily, right? But it can also be we connect research to journalists. And so, like the communications office at SMU heard about your work and connected you with me, and then we connect you with other people. That's more of a little bit of there's a PR arm, right? They're not marketing you, but they are communicating you through their PR tools. And so, is there a difference for you in that in terms of the marketing and PR?
Yeah, I just see like rather than, have this really clear boundary to distinguish between PR or marketing aspects of, the personal branding practice of scholars, I'd recommend an approach which is more focused on integrated marketing communication. So this is like a concept which used more in marketing or advertising, which is talking about when a brand is approaching consumers, right? Rather than just, sending them, for example, ads or sending them a social media message, right? Like the communication happening across platforms on different platforms should maintain a consistent and integrated like approach so that from the consumer's perspective and receiving a really integrated message about the brand. For the scholars like personal branding, this should also be the case.
Can you tell me more about the second portion of your study?
Yeah, totally. So for that piece, we are proposing a model like entitled Destiny. And so for that model, we're proposing different components to holistically thinking about a strategy in conveying like research outcomes or findings to like different stakeholders and building up this like integrated kind of marketing communication for scholars. So in this model, the first letter, like D, refers to digital. So for digital, we're really talking about the different formats of like digital channels that scholars can rely on, right? For example, like audio, like image, like long-term video, like short-term video, like live streams, also like any written types of communication. So the reason that why we're proposing this digital different formats, because there are really different types of like audiences and readers of research, right? There are people who are more like visual, they just like to learning from visual. So for them, like any visual content like images or videos might work better. In Destiny, and then it's E refers to engagement, but specifically there are 5 different like components about engagement. The first one is storytelling. So for this one, we are proposing that like one communicating the research findings to stakeholders, audiences, right? The general public usually do not have the patience to read like a really long academic article. So it is really important to apply like storytelling techniques to communicate to them. And then it's innovation, because basically every research always are making some type of like new contributions or innovative points, right? Because of that, how to well and effectively communicate the innovation points of your research actually play a really big role. And that's also something which actually will be quite appealing to the publics or maybe other stakeholders like companies or policymakers, right? And then it's yield. So for this one, really emphasizing scholars should think both about return on investment and also return on value. So it's really not just about, okay, I'm sending out this piece of information, maybe on social and how many maybe likes I get or comments I get, but also like what kind of like big value, right? Long-term goals, long-term impact it's making. The last two like element in Destiny is time and also network. So for time, that actually is a quite important issue or topic, right? So from a digital marketing perspective, time is considering, first of all, right, what's the time you want to post, right, your content and the frequency of your maybe posting or sharing online. And also how consistent and at what stage of your research, right, you should share in order to make sure you have a consistent communication about a piece of maybe research project you're dealing with. And network is talking about, so during this whole communication, it's really not just about, oh, I'm sharing my content on social media and that's all. But it's more about after sharing the piece of information, the stories, right? How to make sure to engage with the different audiences, stakeholders, and network, keep that networking with them so that to achieve a better potential, for example, finding better collaborators, right? Or engage with the stakeholders that you probably wouldn't be able to engage, like
It can be very challenging to come up with the time for engagement and to consider all of these aspects that are relevant to communications. Do you have any thoughts on how that could be done, especially given that you're an example of, a researcher who's very busy? How could you implement that?
a lot of like researchers or scholars, right? Usually what people usually traditionally what we do is like after we publish maybe an article or we attended an event or had a conference presentation, people just simply maybe post some information, maybe on LinkedIn, right? Just a simple post to explaining the outcome. But we would suggest that, like, in order to maintain a really consistent online presence and especially to building up your personal brand, a better strategy is actually to not only post after your publication, but actually post during this whole stage of your research process. Your goal, you are just try to sharing the information, collecting more better ideas, or maybe looking for opportunities for maybe grants, right, or just some kind of resources. And then like when you go to the late stage of your research where you probably already finished the data collection, you have already got the most important results analyzed, and then you're in the process of maybe drafting a manuscript, right? So now you can start to share maybe some small pieces of the research findings. And then at this stage, you're audiences can then become the general public, media, policymakers, or industry leaders. Because I know some media, they're just interested in getting some, the preliminary knowledge or information about certain really cutting edge research.
Right. One thing is that at institutions, at universities across the country and the world, there are the communications offices. And often they don't have enough people to be able to cover all of the researchers on their campus. But they are extremely valuable and they are so helpful in being able to translate complicated science and publications and research into language that can be then interesting and wanting to be consumed by broader audiences. So, what do you think about that engagement at institutional level for there to be additional support for researchers to be able to create these pieces and to translate and create the language and the texts?
So I'd say like the final strategy is definitely to rely on institutional support for those external communication. So for example, at SMU, right, at the department level, we have a marketing person. At a college level, we also have like a certain office in charge of like promotion and marketing communication. And also at the university level, we have like really professional staff like Aaron, right? So for me, like every time I have something really important get published, I will make sure to keep all of them aware. Like I'll share information with them and then ask, oh, is this something you would be interested in knowing more, right? And if so, I'll share more information. So I just say like as a really busy scholar, I just see like relying on the and not really relying, but more like engaging with the institutional support are fully important because they are experts and they really know how to better communicate those really jargons or complicated information to the public in a more appealing and simple way.
If you can tell me also a little bit more about your work in AI and creating content and how it's perceived, because that's relevant to kind of what you're talking about. And when you're thinking about researchers being more active digitally and utilizing AI, what do you see as best practices or the best things out there that are being used right now?
So for my research, I mostly study how consumers are reacted to the usage of AI in advertising and marketing scenarios. So far, like generally, most of people react really negatively to any type of AI involvement in creative usage. So in other words, like if we are using AI to generate it like advertising content, like advertising message or the video or image, in general, people react really negative to that. So people just don't like AI generated content because they think that's fake and that's lazy, right? But the good news is like people actually react quite positive to AI if AI is used for more like the functional work or the work related to like information analysis or type of work that not dealing with emotions, but more like, oh, you're improving efficiency. So people believe AI actually have strengths in doing that. So because of that, I just suggest like for scholars to disseminating our research, we already have the information, the solid research, the contributions out there, right? And then asking AI maybe to, for example, creating small pieces of information, a little summary of the information, little blogs, right, about your research or explaining your research maybe to different audiences like the general public, right? Writing about your findings or innovation in a simpler way, or even just creating some tables or graphs or infographics, images, right, based on your research. At this level of AI involvement, I don't think that will make audiences like really feel bad or negatively.
What are some of the tools that you might recommend that they use for better managing their time that can help to distribute more efficiently?
For scholars who want to maybe manage multi like social accounts in a more efficient way, then they can potentially use tools like Sprout Social or Hootsuite to just manage like social accounts efficiently. Another possible option today is like for some scholars, I mean, for example, if they really want to get a digital twin of themselves, maybe creating some workshops or videos, right, talking about their research, like one tool they can use is HeyGen, HEYG and HeyGen. So that is like a tool that you can create in your like digital twin about yourself, and you can type all the content you want them to talk about, and that can generate an audio automatically to help you to talk about your research, which can, in my opinion, can be really useful. Yeah.
I think that there was a recent study about that was related more to writings and articles and divulging whether it was AI written, and that it had a negative effect. Did you see that by any chance?
Yeah, actually, most of the marketing and research, like which have been published so far, is people in general just hate AI. But so, for example, in my research, like quite interesting, right? When we are having those AI generated process models in fashion ads, people were like, "Oh, I react really negatively to that." But interestingly, if you are, for example, like giving a more concrete, detailed ad message about how the brand is supporting the cause. For example, the brand positivity. Actually, people reacted better to the ad, even it used AI models. So there are different strategies you can use to like mitigate that negative effect. But in general, like people, especially I feel the younger generation, they don't like AI content. Yeah.
Thank you so much for participating in it. It was great to hear about your work. I'm really fascinated, and I honestly, it would be great to talk more about it. So I will be in touch.
Curious by Nature is a production of Newswise. More than 7,000 journalists get the Newswise wires. Visit newswise.com and find out how to spread your news today.